The reading for this morning is Ruth chapter 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were from Bethlehem in Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Naomi's husband died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. After they had lived there for about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons or her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of the people and by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from Moab. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness, as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant each of you to find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye and wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said again, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to ever have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you want to wait until they grow up? Would you return and remain unmarried just for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung onto her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and to her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or turn my back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will also stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you from me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her to do so. So the women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the woman exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. I pray that my words land with you the way that God intends them to. I want to use this story of Naomi and Ruth and this theme of pride that we're exploring together to talk about the term queering, and specifically talking about queering as a verb. That is what I believe is going on in this story. Whether Naomi and Ruth shared an intimate romantic relationship or not, as some queer readings suggest, the way that they remain steadfast and caring for one another is a queer way of building community and a beautiful example of chosen family. Let's begin with setting the stage here. Naomi had moved with her husband and 2 sons from Bethlehem in Judah to Moab because there was a famine in Judah. Already, we can imagine the deep grief that this family must have been feeling, having to leave their home in order to survive. After they moved, Naomi's husband died. The boy's father died. Naomi was left to care for her two sons all alone. The sons then both married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. We can imagine here the familial system. The women likely would have moved into their home and cared for Naomi and the sons together. Family systems were a very important thing during this period of time and meant that they were all caring for each other. About 10 years later, the sons both die and the three women are left alone. Naomi decides to take the two other women with her back to Judah. She'd heard that the Lord had provided and the famine had ceased. This is a very, very, very heavy beginning to any story, let alone a whole book of the Bible. The first segment is packed with a whirlwind of grief and tragedy and also hope. We see here that there's a family, a community created through the traditional family system that outlasts single lives and into the strength of that community. Let me explain. Naomi and her husband created a family with their children. They were a unit that cared for one another and traveled together. This family was disrupted when Naomi's husband died, so she and her sons continued to build community with one another. Her sons got married, and they continued to care for each other. We can imagine them sharing meals, sharing medicines, telling stories. Perhaps the sons shared stories of their fathers and how he raised them. Perhaps Naomi shared medicines that were passed down through generations in her family. Perhaps the daughters-in-law brought with them recipes from Moab that they learned from their mothers. This was cultural exchange. This was an exchange of love, continuing. We can imagine that these 5 people were in a loving and gracious community with each other. What would that have felt like? We can imagine the power. Then both of Naomi's sons die about a decade later. Naomi's officially left without any provider, formally, in the traditional family system. There's no more head of the family, and it appears in this moment, perhaps, that Naomi is to be a poor widow, or doomed for even worse. She must have felt very afraid, perhaps even losing hope altogether. And yet she heard in the fields that the famine in her home country was over, and there was a sliver of hope for her. Naomi began the journey with her daughters-in-law back to Bethlehem. Let's imagine some more. They're all grieving the loss of their loves, their family. They're likely in pain and devastated. The loss of the life they once knew. The daughters-in-law are traveling now to a new country, under the teaching and guidance of their mother-in-law. This journey probably was not easy for 3 widowed women, and yet they persisted. Maybe this is where you see yourself in this story. Maybe you've been through something tragic and you're on your way to following your last hope. Maybe someone in your circle has experienced something absolutely devastating and you're along for the ride because you can't stand them being alone. This right here is what queering community can be and is about. Naomi tries to push the 2 women away. Go, return each of you to your mother's house, she says. This is a very turbulent moment in this story. The back and forth between the women and Naomi as she's wanting them to be cared for and not face the hardships that she either has or is going to face. She's trying to care for them by sending them away. Naomi becomes firm in her decision to send the women back to their homes. She is selfless, and perhaps more than she needs to be. However, Naomi's pushing, Ruth insists more on going with Naomi and not leaving her alone. Ruth's vow is until their death. We usually hear this reference in the scripture at weddings. For where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. Naomi and Ruth have both been through terrible tragedy and loss, the loss of their loves, the loss of their family, the loss of their home. There was great turbulence between these two women, and this is really a dramatic exchange again. Ruth is saying that no matter how much you try and push me away, no matter what this world is going to throw at us, we will be together. We will handle it together, and we will get through it together. The two of them go to Bethlehem after Orpah goes home. Naomi now is the one coming home. She went home in good faith after hearing that the famine was gone, and she acknowledges the greatness of God in her statements. She tells, despite becoming bitter about the suffering that she has been through. I ask you, have you ever become bitter because of the suffering that you experienced? Have you become bitter because of suffering that you see others experiencing? Have you become bitter perhaps despite receiving unconditional or an intense showing of love from your people around you, from your chosen family? I know I have. Bitterness can really take hold. This is what this story is about to me, our chosen and our found families. A truly queer way of experiencing and moving through this world. Separate from sexuality and gender, separate from orientation and the discrimination that we face. This is all about love and what it means to love each other radically. Personally, my chosen family has saved my life more times than I could fit into a sermon. I'm disconnected from my biological family, much like Naomi, and perhaps even Ruth. I have found people who I share home with, who share their sacred medicines with me, who share recipes passed down from generations and through other friends. These people show me a love that I've never fully understood. We are connected until death, much like Ruth and Naomi. As queer people, as people who are building communities, often that looks separate from and outside of the ideals that this society we live in tries to place on us. We are outside of the heterosexual monogamous marriage. We are outside of the racist and classist systems that discriminate against most of the world. We are outside of the capitalist systems that value productivity and profit over care, compassion, friendship, and reliability. This is queering community as a verb. This is what it means to care beyond what the social expectations are of you, beyond what the potential punishments will be, beyond what will bring you the most money or the most success. Love, a queer and expansive kind of communal love, is really exemplary in these stories of God's people, in these stories that influenced the world of Jesus in the First Testament. This kind of love is what shapes us. It's what connects all of us, all of humanity throughout time and space. This story between Ruth and Naomi reflects stories of love, of friendship, and kinship that I'm sure we can all imagine. This story certainly reflects my close relationships. I imagine this may reflect some relationships you have with people in your ministry, in your friend group, in your family, whatever that word means for you. This is the love that is queering the system. May you go from this place and queer your relationships. May you bring a love like Ruth and Naomi and support one another despite what the systems may do to you. May you combat each other when you try to push each other away and be just a little too selfless. May you experience a support and a love that brings you peace and pulls you from the bitterness that comes from tragedy and suffering. May this love find you. May this love be with you. May it encompass you and hold you for all of time. Amen.